can scream and shout with all your might. Dig in your heels and hold on tight.
I'm trying to find the mistakes in the notes here.
Either you are wrong or I am right.
Don't forget the ever-present third possibility. You are wrong, and I am right. Now, if I could just find... Here we go. I got the new copy of the notes. Now I'm looking to make the correction. Aha, here we go. And of course, my ink pen doesn't want to write good. It is a nice, chilly day outside with the wind blowing. And I, of course, prefer to be a tad bit cold. That's why I have the window partially open, and everything in here is half-assed frozen. Except me. Because I am always juiced and ready to go. Why? Because I am just that goddamn good. Alright, and this can go in the scrap paper pile. Where's the scrap paper pile? This whole office is a scrap paper pile. You know, it's amazing, Randy, considering how much time I've spent cleaning the studio here. It's still a complete disaster area. It's probably your fault, too. Well, because it's always the woman's fault. You should know that by now. Greetings, welcome to Stating the Obvious, brought to you by the Cynical Libertarian Society. I am Skippy. In the control room over there is the lovely and the adorable Randy. We are continuing our quest to humiliate utilitarianism and expose it for the bullshit that it is. We are now at utilitarianism in action. Example number 3, abortion. By the way, the email address, if you want to respond to anything here, is sto@204eastsouth.com. Did I forget anything? It's still the 5th of April. It's now 8:44. Example number 3, abortion. Now I'm looking at my notes and deciding how do I want to approach this. Alright, first of all, let us remind ourselves that utilitarianism finds moral values only in results, only in consequences, not in actions. Abortion, again, is an action. And some people are going to make the argument that abortion is a ends, that abortion is a... Why am I having a brain cramp? Conclude, not... No. Yeah, it is a consequence. Whew. Too much... I know we're supposed to have a test tomorrow, and so I'd been studying for that. A test in my other ethics class. I've been studying for that. My brain is fried after arguing the nuances of social theory. It's like, I'm so confused. Utilitarianism, consequentialist moral theory. Abortion is an action that leads to a consequence, either having a baby or not having a baby. The outcome of an abortion is no baby. The outcome of no abortion is a baby. So the consequences here are baby or no baby. The consequences is not the abortion part. So which of these is morally right? Well, under utilitarianism, which of those would be morally right would be determined by the government under the GHP. So here's the problem with this. This is why utilitarianism does not work for abortion. Thus, in a country like China, the government will tell you having only one child is the right thing to do. And women may be forced to have abortions against their will or put in a position of choosing an abortion when they would rather not. While if they had See, this is the bad thing about writing my own notes. I think I'm better off when I just make things up, because when I try to read things that I've written, I get confused. What did I write here? Alright, let me put the notes down. The hell with the notes. Utilitarianism, abortion. You have two possible scenarios. You have a scenario where a government could say to the people, we need to reduce the population, you're only allowed to have one child, so for whatnot. The government could in fact force people to have abortions in order to reduce the population. Or the fact that the government puts a limit of one child on a family. try to remind me about the BBC thing. I might want to talk about that briefly. Thanks. The fact that the government is going to tell you you can only have one child means that if you get pregnant and it's going to be a boy and you wanted a girl, this might persuade you to go have an abortion at a time when otherwise you might not. If you could have as many children as you want, maybe you wouldn't go get an abortion, you just have the boy and then try again and get a girl or whatever. But the point is that in all of these scenarios, abortion would be correct because the greater happiness is to reduce the population. And if you're reducing the population, if part of reducing the population is to do this via abortion, I'm sure that there are other things included in this as well, birth control and blah, 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 blah. But as that's part of the overall set of actions which is leading to the goal, which is a reduced population, and if the reduced population has been judged to be that which is going to create the greatest amount of happiness, then there is nothing morally wrong with abortion in any of these cases. Now likewise, for example, Romania many years ago, under, as I put in my notes, a communist parentheses utilitarian government, implemented forced pregnancy in order to rebuild the population. And in this situation, women could not get abortions because they were being forced to get pregnant in order to rebuild the population. And again, you can't say there's anything wrong with this because the population is being rebuilt so as to benefit the greater happiness because you need people. Because this always fascinates me about these overpopulation idiots. You look at these countries, this is off on a tangent, but I can do this because it's my show. You look at these countries, the typical ones are the African countries where everybody's starving and all this other stuff. And this ties in so perfectly. Do I want to do this or do I want to save this for later? Okay, now I'm going to go for it because this one's going to be short anyhow. We'll hear some more about this when I get to the debate that we had in class with the animal sciences people. I'm trying to think where to start. So there are people in countries in Africa who are starving to death. And of course the lie that is told is that they're starving to death because there's not enough food. When in truth there's plenty of food. We have food all over America. We throw food away every day. We pay farmers not to grow food. Food rots in the grain houses. There's food all over the goddamn place. The reason these people are starving is because there's two reasons primarily, three reasons. If you look at these countries, you'll see that most of them have a communist type or a dictatorial type or a very corrupt government. You will see that most of these countries are involved in a war, either internal or external, and you will see that these countries have no infrastructure. And of course the reason they have no infrastructure is because they're engaged in a war and they have shitty governments. So without an infrastructure, without roads and trucks and farms and refrigeration and electricity and all these other things, and ports and airports, you can't bring food in and then transport the food around the country and then get it out to people where they can eat it. You also don't have a capitalist system where there's an incentive for people to invest the time and the money in doing these things in order to make a profit. And that's why these people are starving. So now why is there no infrastructure? Well, there's no infrastructure because of bad government. There's no infrastructure because of war. But there's also no infrastructure in many cases because, and this is something the overpopulation wackos will argue with me, and that's fine because they're wrong. In order to get a country, what is this? Oh, never mind. In order to get a country up and running, you need a large population base in order to build this infrastructure. Simply put, you need human manpower to create the infrastructures, to build these roads, to, excuse me, coffee time, to build all of these things and to get this stuff running and to operate it. If you took a country like the United States and you wiped out 50% of the population, I mean, we'd be okay because our infrastructure is pretty much here. We just need to maintain it. And I think there's a considerable difference between creating an infrastructure and maintaining an infrastructure. In these countries over there, they don't have an infrastructure. They need to create it. And to create an infrastructure, you need a larger population. And which is interesting because the overpopulation wackos who claim to care about these people are at the same time trying to reduce their population, which is one of the things which is preventing them from creating the infrastructure they need to have a higher standard of living. But that's all part of a larger theory that I'm working on and gathering evidence for, and it will be presented in the future. How does that tie into what I'm talking about? That's a good question, Randy. Thank you. And, I'm not sure how that ties in. I just wanted to go on a tangent. Well, it ties in with the whole idea of all right, well, look at these countries. We've decided that for them, reducing their population is good. That's going to create the greatest happiness over there. And, of course, that's wrong, but that's what we're foisting on them. If one day somebody figures out that they need more people to increase happiness over there, then is it going to be okay to tell them you have to get pregnant? To tell them you can't get an abortion? Number 5. Under utilitarianism, is everyone equal? Utilitarianists support a woman's right to abortion. They do not support a man's right to abortion. Why is that? I have to explain male abortion. And this is interesting because utilitarians say they support a woman's right to abortion, but you can't have a right to something under utilitarianism. And it doesn't work. You only have the greatest happiness principle as your guiding source, and the calculus of felicity. You can't say somebody has a right to an abortion. You can only say that they can get an abortion if it fulfills the needs of the GHP. Male abortion, female. So see, here's the problem with abortion. You have a man and a woman. The woman gets pregnant. The woman decides she doesn't want the baby, so she aborts it. Everything's good. She decides she does want the baby. The man, of course, can't say anything about this, so the man ends up having to pay for the kid for the next 18 years, just because the woman wanted to have it. Did I talk about this in the marriage thing? I don't think I did. No, I didn't. Male abortion, what I call male abortion. See, here's my whole problem with abortion. I would be perfectly happy with abortion if there was an option for men to abort children also. That is to say, for the man to say, look, I want nothing to do with this kid. I'm going to give up all my rights concerning this child, and in return, I don't never have to pay a fucking cent for the little bastard. Of course, some people say that's shirking responsibility, which is fascinating that when a woman gets an abortion, that's not shirking responsibility. Excuse me. So the point is, the woman can get out of the not just the pregnancy, because it's not like the woman is pregnant for 9 months and the baby disappears. The woman has to put up with the baby for 18 years after it's born also. See, everybody tries to keep this before the birth canal and never looks at after the birth canal. When a woman gets an abortion, it's not just a matter of I'm killing the fetus off so I'm not pregnant. It's a matter of I've just freed up the next 18 years of my life from having to deal with this child. So you see, the woman has the option of saying, I don't want to deal with the child for 18 years. I'm getting rid of it. The problem is, the man does not have that option. The man can't say, I don't want to deal with the child for 18 years. I think we need a legal recourse by which the man can simply absolve himself of any responsibility to the kid. Once that's happened, I would legally, and this is one of those things where there's legal and there's moral and everything else. Morally, I'm not opposed to abortion. Legally, I'm opposed to abortion only because, as I've just stated, the women get the choice, the men get none. As soon as male abortion comes into effect, I'll be fine with this whole situation legally. Let me read my examples here and see what sort of rambling I've done. 5A. If you get a dog, who's responsible? Oh, this is great. Randy, get ready. If you get a dog, who's responsible for who? The human is responsible for the dog. Why? The human is morally and intellectually superior. This position of superiority confers responsibility. You have a higher level of responsibility for that dog. Okay? You are the dog's guardian. You have to take care of the dog. Why? Because dog is lower on the intelligence level. And see, this is why you can't, as the owner of the dog, and I know the PETA members don't like to hear me say that way. The PETA members are like, but you and the dog are co-owners of each other because, oh, the world is a great big happy place with little dolphins and shit. And yeah. Okay, you own the dog. Okay, it's like slavery. You own the dog. But you have a moral responsibility to care for the dog. And you have greater in the relationship between you and the dog. You have greater responsibilities than the dog does. Why? Because you are intellectually and morally superior. Now, 5b. Women can have the baby or not have the baby. Men, on the other hand, are expected to support the child no matter what their personal desire. Why are men held to this higher moral standard? Well, because evidently men are superior intellectually and morally. And given that superiority, men are capable of engaging higher facilities. Wait, I did write facilities, didn't I? Alright, yeah, so much for men's higher facilities. Yeah. Men are capable of engaging higher faculties than women. Thus, the happiness of men counts for more, unless, of course, utilitarianism wants to support the right of male abortion. Men must be superior to women, otherwise, how can you justify holding them to a higher standard as utilitarians do? So let me rephrase this. The woman, there's two people have sex, the man and the woman. And this isn't anything about gay sex, but I mean, to get pregnant, you got to have a man and a woman. Sorry. Okay, so a man and a woman have sex. I'm making little sex motions with my fingers right now, even though none of you listening can see that, but Randy can. She's giggling in the control room. A man and a woman have sex. The woman gets pregnant. Now, the woman has these options. She can be responsible for the baby, for the child, or she cannot. But the man doesn't have the option. The man has to be responsible for the child if the woman decides to have the child. So clearly, the man is being held to a greater moral and legal standard than the woman is. So now, why is this? Now, there can only be one explanation why in this situation one person is held to a greater moral standard. And that explanation has to be, well, there's two explanations. One explanation is that society is acting in a way which is unjust and unfair. The other explanation is that the person being held to the greater moral standard, just like the relationship between you and your dog, is a person that has higher moral and intellectual capabilities. Now, it follows from this, that if the man can be held to a higher moral standard and a higher intellectual standard, therefore men must be capable of engaging higher intellectual faculties, because we are intellectually better than women. Now, under utilitarianism, there is a distinction made not just in the quantity of happiness, but also the quality. That's where the phrase, better Socrates dissatisfied than the fool satisfied. So taking that into account, since men are capable of engaging higher faculties than women are, that means our happiness can count for more than women's happiness, which means that when you're figuring out the felicity of happiness, the happiness of men is going to be more important than women. Now, this entire argument, of course, doesn't jive with the idea of utilitarianism that everybody's happiness counts equally. Because if everybody's happiness counts equally, that means that men and women must intellectually and morally be at the same level. But if that's true, you can't have a double standard for abortion. The whole thing does not work. Number 6, is abortion morally right under utilitarianism? Of course not. Abortion is morally neutral, as it is an action, not an ends. Access to abortion is determined by the government's application of the GHP. If you think abortion is murder, or if you think abortion is a right, either way, as a moral theory, utilitarianism fails. Utilitarianism is simply going to tell you that the action which creates the greatest happiness is the action which is correct. Forcing women to be pregnant could, in the end, create the greatest amount of happiness. Forcing women to get abortions could, in the end, create the greatest amount of happiness. Leaving the choice to get an abortion or not get an abortion up to the women individually could create the greatest amount of happiness. Whichever possible plausible situation regarding abortion would create the greatest amount of happiness is completely variable upon numerous other conditions. Thank you, Randy. I can't talk. Is dependent upon numerous other conditions. So you can't make any kind of blanket statement that utilitarianism supports or denies abortion. Right then. And next is going to be the fun one, because the next one is really short, so we're going to do some tangents. And that means I got to get some research material. We're going to talk about Spear, and we're going to talk about Chad, the TA. Spear is the professor in this class. So next one, the next one, the utilitarian part, is going to be pretty short, and then we're going to have a little bit of fun before we start plowing into the really good stuff here, which is, of course, animal rights wackoism. So, check it out.